let's have a look at Curley's wife next. Okay, so Curley's wife. Like I said in a previous video, if you have like a brain freeze in the exam, you think, oh, I can't remember any of the quotes. Think about some of the characters' names and what they reveal about the character and some of the themes of the novel. So Curley's wife, the very fact we're not told her name, that's quite telling, isn't it? That she is seen more like Curley's possession than a person in her own right. As if Curley owns her. She's not given the respect of having her own name. And this tells us straight away the way that women were treated at this time in 1930s USA society, that women were second-class citizens. Men had all the power. If you want to extend your point a little bit more, you'd say that it was a patriarchal society. So I'm linking to time there, where power was held mostly by men. And so they were in control of women's lives, and in that respect as well, limited the opportunities that women had. Okay, so let's explore this in some of the other quotes as well. Okay, so number one, I'm picking from the Knowledge Organizer, is some of the names that the men call Curley's wife. Jailbait, tart, tramp. Okay, so what's our point first? Our point is that Curley's wife represents the theme of prejudice in the novel, in particular, sexism. Okay, so, and this is seen by the numerous derogatory terms that are used when referring to her of jailbait, tart, tramp. And I say the word derogatory because she's treated with such disrespect in the way she's talked about. They're very mean words, in simply put. She's seen as a real danger in the eyes of the men. She's seen as someone to stay away from. And we've got to think as well that this is how some women were viewed by men at this time, that women represented the sort of the ruin of men's dreams. And this can be tracked back all the way to the Garden of Eden, that women tempted men, and by men giving in to their temptations, temptations that women put forward, that it would mean the ruin of their dreams. And obviously in the Garden of Eden, it was the loss of paradise, the loss of Eden. And what it'll mean in Of Mice and Men, the novel, is that Curley's wife is a bit like a catalyst, isn't she? She represents the ruin of men's dreams, particularly Lenny and George's dream of having a small ranch, because it's when she is speaking to Lenny and she sort of invites him to stroke her hair because he likes soft things that he shares with her, that leads to him holding on too tight when she panics a bit and her neck is accidentally snapped, isn't it? That gives Curley the excuse he needs to basically kill Lenny, isn't it? And that's the end of George and Lenny's dream. Okay, so we've got to think as well that going into perhaps just to emphasize that point, that in terms of time, women were treated as second-class citizens. They were seen as possessions of men, and men had power over them. I can bring this as well into my second point. And you boys seen Curley. Okay, so what's the theme here? Curley's wife represents the theme of loneliness, as seen in the way that she constantly is looking for a husband, or seems to be looking for a husband. Colon, as in, I don't always have to say as we see when she says, or as we see in the text when it states. I could just have colon, and you boys seen Curley. This suggests that that she feels constantly isolated and lonely because she's meant to stay in the house on the ranch, be sort of kept away from the rest of the men. And you've got to think that that's really part of the power of Curley, the power of Curley that he has over her, to isolate her further by seeing to it that no one will talk to her without fear of a beating. So she feels a bit trapped. So she's just looking for opportunities to sort of speak to people. And in terms of being in this house as well, she's trying to get away from Curley, isn't she? She's in a very unfulfilling marriage. Curley doesn't meet her needs. He doesn't really love her. It is a loveless marriage. And she's just looking for some companionship. And unfortunately, the way that Curley has that control and power over her, the men are really worried about her, and hence the reason they call her all those horrible, spiteful names and vicious names of jailbait, tart, tramp. They see her as a danger because that's what Curley has done. They know that if they get close to her, they could lose their job. And obviously for men at this time in history, keeping their jobs and that any sense of security was more important than even companionship, because they were desperate times because of the Great Depression. The economic crisis meant that jobs were extremely scarce. Contracts were short. You held on to that security because obviously money meant being able to pay for food for yourself, to be able to survive. So it's basic survival and looking after yourself first and foremost. And Curley's wife represents that danger where she could put an end to that. She could damage men's ability to survive. What else can we say here as well? Any of you boys seen Curley? We can push the idea as well that yeah, she feels lonely, she's lost, and as a result, I'm going to link this to the third quote then, that she dresses herself up, doesn't she, with full rouge lips and wide space eyes, heavily made up. Do you notice what I can do in my Pete paragraphs? I can bring another quote to deepen my analysis a little bit more, because I can say here, this is how she, in a poor way, she feels it's the only way she can attract attention, isn't it? By dolling herself up so much, by wearing so much heavy makeup. So she's attractive to the men. Now, she really just wants companionship. It's not necessarily looking to for a romantic relationship or to sleep with the men. It's her way that she knows that's her one little bit of power is to use her beauty to try and garner some attention, to try and get some attention. And we've got as well the red fingernails, the red shoes with ostrich feathers. It's almost again the use of red to symbolize that she's a danger. But look, the fact of the matter is the way she dolls herself up so much. Shows her innocence and naivety, that actually she's quite insecure about herself, isn't it? So she can't start a conversation. She's still quite immature. She's using the only sort of bit of power that she feels she has, but she doesn't feel secure enough to be able to have anything else to start a conversation with. She relies on her beauty. And that's, in that way, Steinbeck presents this initial portrayal of Curley's wife as this sort of, to be quite mean and a seductive temptress. But obviously, as even to the point as we see with Crooks, where she says, I could get you strung up on a tree so easy, it ain't even funny. Someone that perhaps we don't really have sympathy for, because she does seem to fulfill this idea that she's going to ruin these men's dreams. And she's the downfall of the men in the story, the idea that she is a catalyst between all the things that go wrong for these men. However, you've got to think at the end of the novel, where we have her telling Lenny about her dream to be an actress, which I'll talk about in a moment. We've got a sense that she's a person. She's a real person, not this villain, but a real person with hopes and dreams that just don't really happen for her, just like they don't happen for so many other people in this novel. Let's sort of go on then to the final quote then, number 5. One thing I will say, though, about number 3, the way she dolls herself up, she's almost imitating these sort of glamorous Hollywood actresses, isn't she? And again, this is the idea that women were in a very difficult position because they were expected at this time in history to look pretty, to wear makeup, but at the same time they were criticized for wearing makeup as well. So they were always in a very impossible position in the eyes of men, because men could constantly criticize women, and with the frustrations, perhaps you could argue that men felt very frustrated because of the Great Depression, struggling to provide for themselves and their families. So that sense of frustration because of the lack of jobs, struggling to find jobs, having to travel and be away from their families and friends looking for jobs, is that frustration they then took out on women. As what we use the phrase is like scapegoats. They use women as like a target to blame for their frustrations. Okay, so the third quote now is, what is it? He says he was going to put me in the movies. Okay, so this we see that Curley's wife represents the theme of dreams as well in the novel, in the way that she shares that she had dreams of becoming a Hollywood actress. Yeah, when he says he was going to put me in the movies, which refers to a traveling entertainer tells her, or a traveling showman tells her that she has got the talent to be in the movies, and she sort of believes him, doesn't she? But again, shows how young and immature and naive she is. And when he sort of moves on, she doesn't receive the letters. She actually, out of spite towards her mother, who she thinks is holding back the letters from her, decides then on that evening, after having an argument with her mother, to go to this dance where she meets Curley and marries him. So she really marries him out of spite. And then she's just nursing these sort of unfulfilled dreams of not becoming a Hollywood actress. But she's sharing with Lenny that she could have been this Hollywood actress. So what's significant here, right? Firstly, she has these big dreams, aren't they? They have big, grand dreams of becoming this Hollywood actress. And this shows you how limited opportunities were for women during this time. They weren't able to have the same sort of jobs, the same high-level jobs as men. They were sort of expected still to remain in the home, to be wives, to be mothers, to do very low-level jobs. And so because they weren't equal to men, it was a sexist society. So that is one of her ways where she feels she could get some power and escape how monotonous, or boring in other words, the ranch is for her. That was her one sort of way of escaping the ranch. Again, she's on an all-male ranch, so there's not really other women to find companionship from people of her own sex, but also escape her dissatisfying marriage to Curley. So this idea that Steinbeck's putting forward, that women couldn't escape society's oppression of them. They're constantly sort of feel this feeling of being trapped. But Steinbeck is then putting forward as well that we've got to have a bit of sympathy towards the end, that she is vulnerable. She's a human being with dreams. At the end of the novel, we have the description of her that she was very pretty and simple, and her face was sweet and young. This is how she's described in Death, and just emphasizes that her innocence really at the end in Death. And it's sad that she only escapes, perhaps escapes this idea of being a seductive temptress who ruins men's dreams after she's dead. So that really shows, doesn't it, that women were in an almost an impossible position, that they couldn't show themselves as rounded human beings when they were alive. It was only perhaps in death and being seen in an angelic way that they could be viewed with any sort of sympathy, which is an incredibly sad way to view how the difficulties women face and the obstacles at this time in history. Okay, done there. That's all.